kind of roll into a new series. It's actually kind of a mini series. When I start putting the year together for preaching, this is kind of a weird time to either have to do a really long first series because, Easter is, the Easter season is coming up. It's going to be here before too long. Or you have to do one and then have a little one in there to kind of mortar the joints a little bit between series, and so that's what we're going to do today. And so we're going to use this series one or two times just throughout different points throughout the year, and it's entitled Faithful. And what inspired my thinking about this was a picture that I saw of a river with different stacks of rocks all around it. They weren't quite like those. I just kind of liked that picture and how it came together. But these are ones that kind of went straight up, and maybe you've seen them before, and the laws of physics for these stacks to be there, and yet, there they are, stable and solid. And in some way, I think that's a picture of what the life of faith looks like. There's so much that makes us up, and the things that make us tick: our past, our dreams, our successes, our failures, the pressures or the hardships that you face. It would be easy to say there's no way that person should be standing. There is no way we should be able to make it through life. And yet, there they are. There we are. You see them, standing up, strong and stable. And again, there's so much to this that we could do months on this topic, but here's what I'd like to do for the few times through the year is to focus each Sunday on maybe one area, one question, one step. If you ever looked, when I was in a statistics class once in college, they showed us a graph of like all these consumer complaints, and they were saying, it would take 15 different changes to address all of these different, problems in the company, but there are like 2 or 3 changes that would change 75% of what's wrong. And they said, rather than trying to change 15 things, why don't we focus on those 2 or 3 things that can make a big difference in how the company operates? And I think there's something about that with our faith too. Maybe we can focus on the 1 or 2 things throughout this that really change how we live, that really bring about faithful living and kind of lead us into more faithful living in 2021. So that's how I want to kind of approach this. And so the first thing I wanted to look at is maybe how can we live faithful in times of trouble and anxiety and fear? I was reminded of this, and it keeps coming back as I was watching the film of all different films, the film Moneyball, and it comes on, network television every once in a while, and it's the story, and Brad Pitt's in it, so I think that kind of gets the lady factor kind of going there a little bit. But it's a baseball film, and it's a story about Billy Beane's attempt as general manager of the Oakland A's to assemble a competitive baseball team using a lot less money than all the other clubs had. And one of the thematic questions that gets asked over and over and over again in the film, if you're paying attention, is what are you afraid of? What's going on? There's a scene where the actor playing David Justice, who was the right fielder, was talking with Scott Hatteberg, who was a washed-up catcher that was trying to be converted to a first baseman. And they're in the break room there in the clubhouse, and David Justice walks in and says, Scotty H., how are you doing? How's it coming along? How are you liking first base? And Scott Hatteberg says, well, it's kind of coming along. It's a work in progress. And as he talks, his voice just kind of trails off. And David Justice says, well, oh yeah, and then just out of the blue, what's your biggest fear? And without flinching, Scott Hatteberg says, a baseball being hit in my general direction. And David Justice kind of chuckles, kind of like we did. He said, that's funny. He said, but, seriously, what is it? And Scott Hatteberg, just stone-faced, says, no, that's really it. That's what I'm afraid of. Seriously, it is. And Dave Justice realized that there was real fear behind that statement. Because if he couldn't figure out first base, his career was over. He's a young man. He's got a wife. He's got kids. Had no idea what he would do if this didn't work out. And so in that moment, you're expecting David Justice to come back. He's the veteran. He's going to come back with something profound to say. And in that moment, in the actor's face, you can tell he has nothing to say. He doesn't know what to say. And so as Hatteberg turned and kind of silently left the clubhouse, the only thing David Juster could muster was to look down and say, well, hey, good luck with that. Good luck with that. All too often, that's the response we hear in the world, we hear in the culture about the things when we, in regards to our trouble and our fear. Hey, good luck with that, because you're on your own. But as we focus on faithful living, guess what? I have good news. That the Bible, God's Word, has something different to say to us than good luck with that. One of the places where we can see what the Bible has to say most clearly, and one of my favorites, is Psalm 46. Because if there was ever a moment when the Hebrews had cause to be worried about troubles, it was around the time we believe Psalm 46 was written. We really don't have a precise way to date those type of things, but it's believed that at this point rumors were reaching Jerusalem that the invincible forces of King Sennacherib of Assyria were marching towards the city. And at that time, the Assyrians were the greatest military machine the world had ever seen, and of course, along with that, which meant they were the cruelest army the world had ever seen, because that's what kept happening. It was the Babylonians, then the Persians, and then the Assyrians, and then the Romans and the Greeks are in there too. And each army became more and more known for their cruelty, for their ruthlessness, for their relentlessness, because that's how armies worked. You had to be cruel. You had to be mean. You had, the rumors were flowing around Jerusalem of doomsday scenarios, and all that could happen. And it's at that point it's thought that, and if you read the prelude to Psalm 46, it's written by what we believe the folks were called the sons of Korah, who were Levites, who were worship leaders, who wrote this psalm. It's believed that they wrote this psalm in response to that moment. And its words have shaped the lives of faith for people ever since. So we're going to jump right into this. This is Psalm 46, and we'll look at the first 3 verses. We'll have them up on the screen. And when we read the Psalms, you are welcome to read it along and to let those words voice a prayer for you. Psalms are the prayer book of the Bible. Psalms are the song book of the Bible. So as you see these words, you don't just have to read them. You can pray them and let them speak for you right now in this moment. All right? So, okay, I'm sorry. We'll put it back up. Psalm 46, 1 through 3. The sons of Korah sing this: Our God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. The writers here utilized a pattern, and we see it quite often throughout the Psalms. They start with this premise about the character of God and then follow with a conclusion based on that premise. And we see it several different places. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, therefore I shall not want, or I shall not fear. And the premise is always bold. It's always courageous. It's always bold. It's so different from what we do, because when we get scared, when we find trouble, we immediately want to talk about the trouble. The psalmist immediately want to start talking about God. Want to start talking about their Lord. And what did they say right up front? They said, our God is 3 things. 3 things for us. And we're going to see there's a lot more than just the 3 things in the psalm. But the first 3 things, they say that God is our refuge. Our refuge. If you look at a refuge, it's a shelter. It's a place that provides a condition of safety. Martin Luther translated this, a mighty fortress is our God, and then he wrote a hymn about it that we sang in church for years after that. But Pastor Chad has kind of his own definition for refuge and his own thinking about refuge, so just take it for what it is. But here's what it is. It's any type of structure where its features, its characteristics become your protection. Where its features and characteristics become your protection. There once several years ago that Tammy and I and the family, we were on the trail at Bandelier, New Mexico, at the National Monument in Bandelier. Some of you all have been to Bandelier and you've walked through there. It has the caves up in the sides of the hills and things. And so we're out walking this long trail. And you know when you're out in those kind of places, you may hear like a clap of thunder and it sounds like it's really far away. And you're like, oh, we may get a little shower. And then a couple of seconds later, you get another clap of thunder and it sounds a little bit louder. And you're always trying to gauge, all right, is it loud enough now that we need to be turning around and heading back? And so, nah, we're not. So we're just going on. And that was probably my decision. So I'll take full responsibility for that. All right. And then all of a sudden, kaboom! And that one was loud. And I was like, you know what? We probably should turn around and head back. And so we start, turning around. We're heading back. We're kind of moving at a brisk pace. We've got Jonathan and we've got Taylor with us. And then it starts to rain. And then another big loud clap of thunder. And then it starts to hail. And so now we're really moving along. And I'm like, you know what? We're not going to get back to the visitor center before this thing just unloads on us. Because, now that there's stuff falling, it's raining hard, the kids are looking scared, and the wife and the dad are looking scared, and so we come around this corner, and right at that spot, there had been a place where some scientists and archaeologists have been excavating part of the site, and they had all left, but they left up their, kind of their tailgate canopy, you know what I'm talking about, that just has like a covering and things like that. And it had all these signs that said, keep out, excavation in progress. And we were like, kids, and I just threw that out of the way. I said, in we go. And so we were in, all that we could find, all that we, that became our refuge. And it was loud and it was crazy and there was hail falling and it, thunder and just going on. There were other people we talked to. They were like, man, we climbed up those ladders into the caves and we just stayed in the caves during that time. People all over the place were looking for refuge, looking for protection, and looking for something where its characteristics become your protection. And God says, the sons of Korah say, that's what God is. God's characteristics become our protection. And it's good to understand that idea of refuge, because if you read the Psalms, you're going to find that word refuge used like 23 other times in the Psalms. That was an important understanding of God that the Hebrews had, that we need to carry along with us, God as our refuge. But God's also our strength. That was this next thing. And they talk, if refuge is something that is external, you might think more of strength as this more internal aspect, this dynamic empowering of God's people in the middle of tough, anxious moments. Have you ever had to go through something really difficult and you're thinking, how in the world am I going to make it through this? And then there it is. There's that strength. And you walk through a tough moment you didn't know was there. And then the third one, he says that God is our help, but not just our help. There's this unique little, adjective there, is our present help in trouble, as opposed, I guess, to distant help. You ever known people that were distant help? One of the jokes about generals in World War II is that, World War I, was that there were folks fighting in the front, and they were way back in the back. And there was a joke that was going around, and whereas the general and the colonel went to visit the men on the front lines, and they said, he's talking to a private. It says, if you should falter, the colonel and I are behind you. And someone leaned over to that soldier and said, About 35 miles behind you, to be exact. Distant help. It's the difference between someone trying to talk you through a computer problem on the phone and someone that's sitting there next to you. And we've all had to do that. I hate trying to talk through. I'll have family members and things call me, say, I can't get this to work. And I say, okay, you need to go to the drop. Now, what's that? Okay, up at the top left corner, go over 1, 2, 3, and then and it happens for me too. And you can feel that frustration. Whereas, there are times when people are right next to me and saying, okay, that one. Okay, present help versus distant help. God says, or the psalmist say, God is the one who is on the front lines with you, whatever you're going through. And that's the psalmist's presence. God is our refuge, our strength, our present help. And that bold premise always leads to a bold conclusion. He says, therefore, I will not fear, though the waters roar and foam, the mountains quake and surge. He didn't say, therefore, there is nothing to fear. He just says, therefore, I will not fear. And he uses this really important kind of symbolism here. Even if the mountains fall into the sea and the waters roar and the mountains shake and surge. The mountains were this idea of stability and security. And in that early understanding, it was thought that the mountains were kind of this pillar that held the world, that held the sky in the, up where it was and held the world down beneath. That the mountains were that solid, stable fortress. The oceans were always considered this chaotic force that was moving around. And some of you have been on the water when it was a chaotic, you're on a cruise ship and you're going through a bad storm and the waves smack against the side of the boat and just go boom, and it echoes through the boat and it just feels chaotic. And so the psalmists are saying, you know what? If everything that is solid and stable in the world just disintegrates into chaos, we're not going to fear. Literally, we won't fear even if it feels like the world is falling apart around us. Ever felt that way? Maybe the world's falling apart around me. Now hear me for a second. The psalmist is not trying to say, shame on you if you're afraid. But what the psalmist is inviting us to is a deeper level of trust by focusing not on all the troubles around us, but by focusing instead on who God is. Because here's the truth, folks. Trouble is going to reveal where you take refuge. Trouble is going to expose what you trust in. And what the psalmists are trying to say over and over right up front is that the refuge that is strong enough for what you're going through is God and God alone. So that's the premise. That's the first part of this. But then he goes on and says some more, that God is more than just a refuge. He's also a river. And you need to kind of be okay with this. There's a lot of metaphorical language in the Psalms. That the psalmists love to kind of compare God and God's work to things that they see out in nature that really speak to them. And so one of those metaphorical symbolisms for God often is a river. And we see this in Psalm 46, 4 through 7. Beginning in verse 4, he says this. And again, you're welcome to pray this. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice. The earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. When a city had a river that ran through it, it made the city really, really hard to besiege, okay? Because it had a supply of water, and it was kind of assumed that there might be some fish and things that will come through the water. You're able to grow food. You're able to prepare food, because if you have flour, you've got a supply of water to prepare bread. And so, the invading army couldn't just wait outside for you to starve, because you had a way to keep producing food. We've got water, you could lean over the side of hey, we got water, guys, we can do this all day. We can do this all month. And so as long as you want. But what was always a concern for the people in Jerusalem was that they had no river. And some of you have been to Jerusalem or been around that area. You know that Jerusalem was fed at that time by a few springs, some springs here and there. They had to really work hard to get water into the city. And I imagine at that time there were some people that were looking and thinking about, the Assyrian army coming and thinking about getting ready for what they needed to do and probably this siege that was about to happen. And they're thinking in their mind, or maybe they're speaking it out loud, we don't have what we need to make it. The river needs to provide us something. We don't have what we need. We can't stand against the Assyrians. They'll starve us out because we have no river. The psalmists say, yes, we do. We do have a river. There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God. And did you see verse 5? God is within her. She will not fail. God will help her at the break of day. And they're saying, don't you see? God is the river. God is the river. Reminds me of that great line from Lawrence of Arabia, and I'm really pulling way back. So some of you know where Lawrence is talking to Prince Otta in front of Prince Otta's tribe, and he says, with the British will make you rich. The British are going to give you gold. And I love what Otta says in response. He said, you know what? The Turks paid me a golden treasure, and yet I am poor because I am a river to my people. And all of the tribesmen just explode in praise. Explode in cheering, explode in really worship of the prince. Because he's saying, everything I receive flows through me to nourish my people. The psalmist is really saying, you know what, that's what God will be to us, except God never becomes poor. All the resources of the universe are at his disposal. Nations are in uproar. Guess what? God can melt the earth with a word. Don't worry about those things. God will be a river. God will provide what we need. And though we may not live in Jerusalem, we may not live near a river. I don't know if Wolf Creek counts as a river or not. Take a vote. I'm kind of, some of you know, I'm really, I have this interest in Wolf Creek. It's just really interesting. Flows by my house. Tammy wants her ashes spread at Christopher Creek, and I've offered Wolf Creek to her. That's all I'm willing to go. At this point right now. But he says, we don't live in Jerusalem. We don't even live near a river. But you know what? As a citizen of the city of God, as a believer in this city, just as in the old one, and the one that's to come, there's one thing that's the same. God is the river. God is the river. It's so easy in times of trouble to dwell on what you don't have, on what you're lacking, on what you're missing, what's not there. The psalmists, again, are turning our focus into this different direction. That God is a river to his people. That God will help at the break of day, and as it says elsewhere in the Bible, that his mercies are new every morning. That God is the river. God is your river. God has what you need right now. So we see in trouble that God is our refuge. We see that in trouble God is a river, but we also see in trouble that God is revealed. That God is revealed. Last part of this passage, real quick, is Psalm 46, verses 8 through 11. The writer says, come and see what the Lord has done. The desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. there's two final commands here in this last section. And they're both vitally important in our times of trouble and fear to have around us, to have in our heart, to have that idea of God being revealed. And the first one is this. The psalmists now are saying, come and see what the Lord has done. Come and see what the Lord has done. Don't forget what God has done. And then he says, see the desolations that he has brought upon the earth. And sometimes we kind of scratch, what in the world's going on there? You know what I think is going on? Again, this is kind of, Pastor Chad's conjecture here. People in their fear at the time were saying, oh my gosh, the Assyrians are going to bring desolation. Have you seen that? The Assyrians are just going to tear through things and tear it. They're so powerful. We've never seen anything like this. And I think God is trying to say, you're worried about their desolation? Why don't you go back and read through your history? I've been able to wield a little power myself, God is saying. You're worried about their desolation. I've been able to lay out a little desolation too. You know what? Why don't you remember what happened to Pharaoh's army at the Red Sea? Why don't you go remember what happened at Jericho when the walls and the things were all shut up and there's no way we're going to get in there? I can wield a little power myself, guys. Don't let that. Don't let your focus be on how powerful they are. Why don't you focus on what I've done? As you see me revealed, I'm very capable of handling those who come against me. I'm capable of taking care of it. I can bust up their bows and spears. I can make a bonfire of their shields. I can destroy anyone's ability to wage war. It says when you're fearful and scared, you need to see, this isn't the first time I've come through for you. This isn't the first time I've been there. This isn't the first time I've worked powerfully in your history, in your life. Look back through your history, and you can look back through your own personal history, and I guarantee if you look, you'll see that God's done some crazy, powerful things again and again and again. Come and see what the Lord has done. Come and see me revealed in your life. Which leads us to the final command. That's the one that we know, the one that we've heard over and over, but maybe have never seen in the full context of the psalm. And here's what's interesting. The person who's speaking changes. Because it's no longer the psalmist speaking. Did you catch who's speaking now? It's God speaking to his people. And this is what he says. Be still and know that I am God. Sometimes we don't weight that statement enough. We don't put enough weight on it. Sometimes we want to maybe reduce it to like a quiet time or like, just a meditation time. And while it certainly includes that, it's so much more than that. Because the word here means stop, halt. And it's kind of going two directions. It's sending out meaning to two different people. It's addressed to those that would come against God. And it's saying, you need to back up and reevaluate who you think you're going up against. It's almost like God saying, in a worthy way, you know who I am, right? You need to stop. You need to halt. But there's also another prong of this command that is directed to God's people. And what he's trying to say is, you need to stop your panicked actions. You need to stop your frenzied attempts to control and just rest in the knowledge of who I just revealed myself to be. There's a scene in the classic TV show that all people should watch, maybe one of the top 10 TV shows of all time, SpongeBob SquarePants, where SpongeBob Squidward is telling SpongeBob this ghost story of like the hash slinging slasher. I want to know how many people in here know about the hash slinging slasher. Raise your hand if you know about hash slinging slasher. Yeah, Tammy knows about it because she's been forced to watch it several times. Some of you know about the hash slinging slasher, and the guy, it's a ghost story. He's lost his hand, and it was replaced by a rusty spatula and those kind of things. And so he's telling this, and it's just a ghost story to try to scare SpongeBob. And so you kind of get the setup, and then Squidward eventually says, and he came up from behind you, and he grabs him, and then SpongeBob just goes, woo, 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 and just starts running around, woo, 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 and this goes on for a while. And you can see when it's on in the face of my wife, just this, and it's the metaphor, metamorphosis is quite stark. It's just, her face is just shriveling up, and I can tell that she just wants to look at the TV and say, "Stop! Stop it! Stop!" We're watching a war series, and there's a soldier in there that's just horribly cowardly, and he's like, "What are they going to do? They're going to come and get us, and they're going to torture me." And he's going, and all the rest, like, "Be quiet! Stop it! Stop! Stop!" I wonder if we look like SpongeBob to God sometimes. Things going around in our world, and in our mind and our soul, we're like, and God is saying, "Stop! Be still! Know that I am God, and I'm here for you." And it brings me back to this wonderful passage in Exodus 14, 13, and 14. The Israelites are crossing, and Pharaoh and his army's coming, and they're all saying, "What are we going to do? What are we going to do? They're going to come. We should have just stayed in Egypt." And then finally Moses answers the people, and this is what he says in 13 and 14. He says, "Moses answered the people, 'Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you,'" and here's where it gets really rich for us. "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. It's almost like God's saying, "Hey, stop and take a look at me. Stop and start thinking about who I am. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be revealed." And it ends as it began. "The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress, our refuge." Now, like I said, we're not sure if this was written at the time when the Assyrians came, but it's very interesting what happened when the Assyrians did come. The Assyrians besieged Jerusalem. King Sennacherib's commander delivered a surrender order to King Hezekiah. It said basically, "Hey, you need to surrender because your God can't help you." And the prophet Isaiah goes to King Hezekiah and says, "You know what? The city's going to be delivered." And you can read about this. It's in the Chronicles and the King's passages there. Hezekiah and the people were praying, and it says that an angel came to the Assyrian army, one angel, and thousands died overnight. And then all of a sudden, the Assyrian army just kind of left, just melted and went away. And you can look at like Assyrian history and Assyrian writings, and you can see where King Sennacherib talks about having Hezekiah surrounded like a bird in a cage, and then there's nothing else about it. It's almost like at a press conference where someone says, "Hey, King Hezekiah, what happened after you?" No comment. We're not going to have any comment about that. We're not releasing any because it didn't happen. It's a powerful account. And you know what, folks? I wish all trouble went that way. Sometimes it doesn't. Troubles and fears can move in for a while. They can stay, and they are different for all of us. So as we close today, maybe Let me put it like this. Are you afraid of something this morning? Think about this now. Some aspect of your life that generates fear when you think about it. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's that things in your world are spinning out of control. Or whether you have enough money to pay the bills or the rent, or what's happening in a relationship. Maybe it's fear of living into a future that looks a lot different than what you thought it would look like. A lot of what ifs. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if things don't get better? What if this doesn't work? Folks, if you're afraid, the temptation always exists to take God out of the picture and place the situation completely under our control. And when we do that, it always ends the same way. It always ends up we always end up feeling overwhelmed and crushed by what we're facing. God wants you to live differently than that, and the difference doesn't lie in somehow summoning up your own courage as much as it does in diving into the invitation to trust, the invitation to faith in a sovereign God who has everything we need for the time we are in. And that kind of trust changes those what ifs to even ifs. Even if that happens, I will not fear. Even if this doesn't work, I will not fear. Even if the mountains fall into the sea, even if it feels like the world is falling apart, I will not fear. Folks, whatever your biggest fear is right now, whatever trouble you are in, God has so much more to say to you than, hey, good luck with that. God says, I am your refuge. I am your strength. I am your present help. I am your river, and I am the God who's been revealed in your life, and you will see me revealed again. You don't have to panic. You don't have to live in fear. I'm here for you. You just need to be still. Let's pray together. Father, as we allow this time for your word to kind of wash over us, and as we feel the need at times to pray these words as our own, and you invite us to allow these psalms to speak for us. Help us to respond by placing the things that we're scared about in a place where we instead don't focus on those things, but are in a place that we can be invited and move into deeper trust and move into you as our refuge. And we just ask that you would help us to respond to that right now. Amen. I'm going to ask you to stand up just for a minute, and I'd like to take just a couple of minutes here in response. Because wherever we're in a group this size and we have people that are joining us online, it never fails that there is somebody somewhere in this room that is struggling profoundly with something that scares them. Or working through a time of trouble that just feels like they're about to go under. Folks, today I feel like God has placed this psalm in front of you for this moment, because God is inviting you in this moment of what ifs, and the what ifs are rolling through your mind, to change those to even ifs through an invitation to trust deeper in God as refuge. To move your thoughts, to move your focus on the God who promises to provide you what you need for the time that you are in. The God that invites you not to panic, not to run around. The God that invites you to have moments where you can stop and be still and know and trust in the God that is there for you. So whatever it is that you have to do this morning, maybe you realize that, or whatever this time of fear has shown you your need of Jesus, and you've never made that decision. You've never made that decision to trust in the one who took all of the sin that should rightfully be accounted to you upon himself, who took that and died with it and paid the penalty, paid the debt you owed, so that you could live in newness of life, so that your heart could be renewed by the sacrifice that Christ has made. And maybe Christ is calling you this morning to become a follower of Jesus and allow that newness of life to bring you into a deeper level of trust and allow you to step into God's wonderful protection and refuge. Whatever it is that God is calling you to right now, we're going to let the room be silent just for a moment and just let you pray and start that conversation with God right now. Father, in this moment, I feel like people, you're doing work in people. You are inviting people to step from a place of fear to a place of trust. You are changing what ifs to even ifs right now, and I thank you for that. I thank you for the work of your Spirit. You are inviting people into deeper relationship, or maybe inviting people to start a relationship with you. And we just ask that you would continue to do work, that work would move beyond this place, beyond this moment, and that you would continue to help us walk in newness of life, to walk in trust of you. So, Father, as we move from this day, moving out into our different places, I just ask that you would help us to continue that walk, to help us to move deeper, to give us moments where we stop and just focus and take a good, long, hard look at you and what you're doing. Father, as we give our offerings, I just ask that you would help us to be generous, that you would allow that to be another place where we say that you are Lord of this aspect of our life as well. Thank you for this moment. Continue to work in us, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. In your worship guide, there are a couple of things going on. The women's Bible study, the Believing Women, is still going on. I think there's 2 more Mondays left after this. They're going to have a new one. I think we're going to be starting another women's Bible study here very soon, and so be on the lookout for that. If you would love to help with our Agape lunch this Friday, we will be doing that over at St. John's Missionary Baptist Church. I think we have all of the food, but if you want to come and help serve that and put it together and just be a part of that ministry to help those in need, to feed those who are hungry, it is a worthwhile ministry, and it's a ministry that I believe God honors and causes to do good things and to be a wonderful witness of who we are in our world. If you are struggling with something, if you are scared about something right now, you need to talk to somebody and let somebody pray with you about that. And so please don't leave today without talking to, we'll have some people over at our prayer wall. If you want just to talk with somebody about something that's going on in your life, or just say, hey, I need prayer about this thing that's going on, avail yourself of that opportunity. Don't leave here without doing that kind of work with God that you need to do. It's been wonderful to worship with you, and as we go from this place today, go knowing that that the what ifs in your life, God is ready to change to even ifs as you trust in Him more deeply. Let God be your refuge this week and beyond. He's there for you. Amen. We'll see you.